Nominate for me one thing, just one thing, that Christianity has introduced that doesn't have some source, some parallel, some analogy in previous and in other civilizations. One novelty, one innovation in thinking about anything, ethical, metaphysical, or anything you like. And I must say, I've racked my brains over this often enough, and I cannot think of one. I would love to hear.
Okay, so the challenge here and the question is that name one thing that Christianity gives to the world that is unique from any other religion, from any other forms of philosophies or ethical guidelines, whether that be in other polytheistic religions or philosophies of different cultures. I would say one of the most pivotal and the greatest case for this, in my opinion, is that for the history of mankind, the world has sacrificed themselves for their God. There was only one God who sacrificed themselves for the world, and that is Yeshua Mashiach, or Jesus Christ. It's really one of the most profound consciousness that you can possibly think and imagine, that there is this omnipotent being that operates at such a magnanimous degree that sacrifices themselves for the freedom and the emancipation of their followers, their children. That the Greek gods ate their own children so that they may maintain their power. Zeus, throughout the history in all different mythologies and different cultures and their gods, it has always been, whether that be polytheistic religions, it has always been that you must sacrifice yourself and children and many different offerings of death just so that you can link yourself to a god and your deities. Whereas God himself in Yahweh has offered his one and only begotten Son, so that whomsoever believes in him shall never perish but have everlasting life. That is what I think is such a unique perspective that Christianity offers, that I would say that none other could offer, and none other throughout history would offer, because it goes against human nature. And also the second one is a holy matrimony, a marriage, and one that is specifically monogamous. I mean, it goes against the very nature of humanity. We are polygamous by nature. We want more, especially the man. We will always want more and more, but in order to safeguard society, and more specifically the woman, to create balance, is that holy matrimony or marriage in a monogamous relationship and marriage is introduced. That is, I would say, one of the greatest leaps in civilization, in humanity, because for the entirety of the time we've always been polygamous, and it's within us right now. It's in our nature to be polygamous. So it actually creates discipline in us. It somewhat creates a restraint in society so that it doesn't get too wild. It caters to our civilized nature, because if you just have more and more and more, I mean, it's the same thing as eating more and more and more. You become glutton, and when you have more and more marriages and wives relationships, you also feed into that very same lust. And in order to eradicate that, Jesus introduced a monogamous relationship, in that man will only have one wife as God has created them. I mean, which is true. God did create Adam and Eve. That's one man or one woman. And all throughout the time, we may have forgotten that, because we fell through our fallen nature, which is to have more and more and more, to be selfish and to feed and cater to our very desires, which is against God's rules, because he understands that human desires, is evil. I mean, you can just look at the world out there. Look what they do. If there are no rules, they will cater to their nature. That's the negative aspect of humanism, because you have no rights. You'll only be subject to your human impulses, which they're blinded by, and they can't see that it is not good. Humans are not good by nature. And you don't even need to go anywhere to read books to see that. Just go out there in the world and see what human nature is. And the third one is turn the other cheek and love thy enemies. I mean, personally, that's like one of the biggest for me, because, hey man, if you throw stones at me, best believe you got a free piece coming back your way. Boom, bop, bop, boom. Hey man, that's just me. I love boxing, I love fighting, and like most men do. And if you go to your human nature, in that you will always be aggressive and you'll always want revenge. It's human nature. But this says to turn the other cheek. That means if someone slaps me, I gotta turn the other cheek for them to slap me again. And not only that, love your enemy. So the person who slaps me twice, I gotta love him in return. Now come on, that goes against all my impulses. If someone slaps me, it's an overhand, a left hook, and an uppercut. I mean, it's so tough to do that, but it actually create more of a civilized society. Because when you think about it and you look at it, if an eye for an eye is the rule which we abide in, then it leaves the whole world blind. It's one of the greatest things that people overlook, in that if we don't have the Christian tenets and principles in our society, such as turn the other cheek and love thy enemy, that we would be embroiled in chaos all the time. Now, don't get me wrong, there are wars in Christian countries. It doesn't preclude them from having corrupt agendas in the grasp of their power. It can be corrupted. We're all human. But this specifically goes against it, in that anyone who conducts themselves as such in a corrupted manner that is violent goes against the way of God. Specifically, in order to have a peaceful existence in society, you're going to have to be able to forgive people. You can't keep on wanting revenge. If you want to coexist in harmony, you're going to have to forgive and forget. And that is what the Bible teaches. And in terms of Christianity, it's one of the principles and the greatest power of Jesus is that he's not like Thor. He doesn't have a hammer. He doesn't have all these type of things. And when you look at different religions and mythologies, they always embody a certain power, typically one that imbues some sort of humanistic desires, like Hercules' strength and the power over things, whereas there was only one deity or God that existed with the power over himself, because every other god has fallen to themselves, and that is the man without sin, that is Jesus Christ. And his power, his ultimate power, is that he was a man without sin, meaning he was a man that didn't falter from his own desires and the human proclivity to fall. So therefore he is not of the fallen nature. And one of the biggest implications of that is that he is the only man which has conquered himself. Throughout history, we are all fallen, every single one of us. No matter what the God is, we have all fallen into sin. At one point or another, we have been overcome by our own emotions and our own desires, whereas God is the only man that walked the earth that didn't stumble. So he is the only one with the right to lead us into something that we can never go. A man without sin has a purpose, and that's to lift us up and take us to places where no other man has ever been. One of the greatest tenets of a Christian civilization and a Christian society is that men were all created equal in the image of God. That means equality for all. Because when you look at different religions, they will always have one higher than the other. And when you look at different cultures, they will always have some sort of caste system, like the Hindus, the Brahmins, and the Dalits. And you have the Jews and the Gentiles, the non-believers. They are second-class citizens that, you should keep yourself away from. And most different religions and cultures have these also. And when you look at racism, that is also the same case in America, the Atlantic slave trade, and that one reigned over a certain part and diminished and devalued the human life of another. Whereas in Christianity, all should be equal, whether that you're tall, you're small, you're beautiful, you're ugly, you're rich, you're poor. It is all equal, because you are not judged by the money in your pocket or the wealth in your bank or the knowledge in your mind or the titles in your name. You are judged only by your heart. That is your character. Just as MLK said, we dream of a world to judge each other by character and not by the color of their skin. And that is the ultimate goal and principles of Christianity, which we can never really achieve without all of us being equal. And all the different other religions, innately, they have a structure. Different cultures, there are certain races that reigns above others, and the things we measure them by is the humanist aspects, such as money, power, titles, knowledge, prowess, physically or otherwise. And these are how we rank our society by. Everything's hierarchical. Whereas in a Christian society, in Christian values and principles, only God reigns above all, not a priest, not a pope, or anybody else. And that whomsoever you are all equal in the eyes of God. That means the lowly street sweeper is going to have the same value in God's eyes than that of a president. And no one has the right over you or the power over you. That is why freedom and equality for all is the main principles of Christianity. Don't get me wrong, there are many people in Christianity and Christian nations that have inflicted slavery, that has enacted against God's will. And that's why you shouldn't look at those, because we should scorn those parts of society that they've grossly manipulated the power and the word of God to their advantage, to their human desires. Because at the end of the day, slavery, everything else and everything that is hierarchical, it's all about power and the human greed, the need and the necessity to rule over one another. That's how everything evil starts. Hence, money is the root of all evil. Which goes to one of the last points I want to make, which is God judges by the heart, not by titles, not by your appearance, not by your status in life. He doesn't care about any of that. And that is such a beautiful understanding to make, because in this life you'll always be judged by the money you have, your job, your profession. What are you in society? What do you rank as? And that's just the human nature. But whereas God, he looks at you, and even at your lowest time, he loves you just as much as you would at your highest time. Whereas the world only loves you at your highest. When you're broke, when you're poor, when you have nothing, the world discards you. You're an outcast. Like, no one wants you. Whereas God wants you all throughout that time. Because most cultures in the world are there for their God. There's only one God that is there for their people. Which leads to the last point I want to make. And that is, heaven is not yours. Christianity, it's a pathway, not religion. And it's not a work-based pathway, meaning you can't get entrance to heaven just by your deeds alone. It is by sheer grace and your faith and love which gets you there. And when you look at all the different religions and cultures, everything is work-based. That means you can commit all the greatest sins, but as long as you abide by certain rules and do these work, you can get into that heaven. Valhalla, for instance, the Nordic mythology, and that you can get to that heaven, which is Valhalla, as long as you fight well and sacrifice your life for their God, which is Odin. As long as you make a sacrifice, then you shall get to that destined promised land. But God is the only one that says, no, you can't get here by your work. You can't arrive here just because you bought the ticket, you got the suit, and no, you don't have a seat here. You can only come here through my authority. That gives him power over death, because only his authority can grant you everlasting life. Meaning we can't come there like thinking, hey man, I donate this much to charity, I done preach all these words, I done help all these people, hey, I gotta get in, right? And no, you're here by your humbleness. You can only come through these gates of heaven, if you completely submit yourself to the will of God, and you are completely selfless, meaning everything you have left behind and in the world. There is nothing that is the world that will come through those gates of heaven. No sin can enter, meaning whatever it is that is worldly of you must go. And if you still have that towards the end of your life, then you know you are not properly equipped to enter the gates of heaven. That's why this is the only religion. In order to get to heaven, it's not by works, it's by becoming. You have to become something more than yourself, and you can only achieve that if you are born again, beyond the limits of your worldly bodily proclivities. So all in all, this is my rebuttal, or just really to elaborate that individual, because he is a bastion of humanism, and that we don't really need Christianity or religion for that matter in order to create a great society. But I must say that there is only one thing that humanism stumbles upon. Don't think that this is a new idea, because humanism has existed all throughout humanity. It's called human nature, and we have seen civilizations follow that nature. We have seen where that has led. And also, one of the greatest tragedies of humanism is that virtue falls in its place when you dehumanize others. And it's very simple. There are no principles or law in human nature that says we are all equal, because when you look at different cultures, when you look at different nations, there are some that are greater than others. How would you prevent people's human nature from acting in their ways and conquering and having more than what they believe belongs to them? And that's what we have seen with many different regimes, just like the Third Reich. Hopefully this video somewhat enlightens you, and if you'd like to hear more about this and talk more about this, I'd love to hear your opinions, whether they're before, against. Like, I'd love to hear all of them, and we can together grow as a person and become more enlightened in these topics, especially these great philosophical ideas that we really need to view as a whole. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and let's discuss them below. Thank you for watching another episode of The Third Eye. This is Thirdy here. Peace.